No Red Hot Chili Peppers performance ever featured John Frusciante. Never once did he spar with reporters, dance for the cameras, or give a speech at an awards ceremony. However, his guitar is what you hear when you listen to Californication and imagine the world descending into a lovely melancholy. A low, unassuming noise that conveys an indescribable anguish that words fail to capture. There was no official training for him. He was not a star in the making. He had no desire for stardom. Still, he rescued the explosive Red Hot Chili Peppers from their anarchy, transformed the band's sound, and contributed to their most beloved albums. Once, due to addiction, and again, in pursuit of creative freedom, Frusciante walked away from fame. He was formerly a ghost, survived a near-death experience in a decaying house thanks to delicate fingertips and songs that gushed like raw wounds. An unassuming talent, he aspired only to play music in solitude, never to become famous. His remarkable invisibility is precisely what makes him stand out. Background: John Anthony Frusciante came into this world on a chilly winter day in 1970 in Queens, New York. Rules and control were important to his father, a revered judge. His opera singer mother instilled in him an appreciation for the arts and a love of music. But they didn't believe in one another. John was 6 years old when his parents divorced. The reason was not clarified. Nobody did anything to find out who he wanted to live with. After his mother and her new spouse wed, he was crammed into a little suitcase and sent to Tucson, Arizona. For a new beginning, they uprooted their lives a few years later and settled in Santa Monica, California. However, a youngster who has lost their groundwork cannot begin again. Even as a child, John felt like he was missing something. Living under strict regulations and emotionally distant, he was the missing piece in a new family based on structure. An embrace from his mom had been a long time ago, and he couldn't place it. He felt a chill from his stepfather. John would occasionally lose track of his biological father, who stayed in New York and wrote letters infrequently. So he went off to his own little universe, where no one ever told him he was being too chatty or asked too many questions. This was the era of record albums. His obsessions were David Gilmour's eerie solos and Frank Zappa's meticulously chaotic music. Praised Jimi Hendrix for evoking sobbing sounds from guitars. The bizarre band the Red Hot Chili Peppers guitarist, Hillel Slovak, who had curly hair, was someone that somebody adored. John acquired his first guitar, a battered Fender Mustang with corroded strings and a damaged body, when he was 11 years old. However, it was like a best friend to him. His fingers bled from his relentless practice, which lasted 10 to 12 hours daily. Till midnight, when his mother begged him to stop, he continued. That was not John's goal when he played. In order to prevent himself from collapsing, he played. Nonetheless, he remained the outcast in the classroom. People who are socially uncomfortable, have few friends, and are bullied frequently because they dress in old clothes and don't know what's happening in the world of sports and fashion. Despite many's wishes, he did not finish high school and instead attended Hollywood's Guitar Institute of Technology, an unusual action for a teenager. However, he withdrew once again a few months later. Theory was their subject. All John wanted was to understand emotions. It was not appropriate to put music to the test. It was his sole source of vitality. John stayed in his small bedroom in his late teens, recording RHCP riffs over and over again, while his friends were busy applying to colleges or going on dates. Wishing he could be a hero like the ones he revered, he had no interest in becoming famous. He merely desired to collaborate with others who comprehended the significance of guitar as a means of expressing suffering. Suddenly, his fate had arrived, far earlier than he had anticipated. The first carry, death, not a bell, but fate, came knocking in 1988. John Frusciante's childhood hero, the Jewish guitarist Hillel Slovak, passed away at the age of 26 from a heroin overdose. John felt a peculiar, hurtful, and yet beckoning emptiness in his heart after he passed away, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers lost their musical spirit as a result. Back then, John was barely 18 years old, scrawny, unruly, and completely unknown. He was also a strange youngster who had memorized every note that Slovak had ever played and who wrote letters to record labels. However, no one had ever been closer to the band than he was. His obsession had driven him. After the loss, RHCP drummer and best friend of Slovak, Jack Irons, declined to continue. They were on the verge of disbanding. But after a number of tryouts, the surviving members took a risk on Frusciante, a young man who didn't seem the part, had a quiet stage demeanor, and could make the room go silent whenever he picked up a guitar. The 1989 album Mother's Milk was his debut with the group. Although it remained unpolished and heavily impacted by Slovak, the crisp riffs and unexpected melodic twists were beginning to show. John first showed that he wasn't merely a copycat with the Hillel-inspired song Knock Me Down. In a band that had recently become soulless, he was starting to discover his own voice. The Red Hot Chili Peppers went to studio to record their 1991 album Blood Sugar Sex Magik just a year after that. There was a complete shift at that point. The group took refuge in a home with Rick Rubin, the producer. There would be no television, no phones, and only music. John Frusciante exploded in that secluded room with guitar lines that combined elements of funk, punk, and blues into a raw and sensitive sound. His performance was neither loud nor theatrical. He wasn't boasting when he played solos. It seemed as if he were chatting with his own spirit as he performed. It was never intended for their defining hit to occur under the bridge. Anthony Kiedis had penned the poem, which dealt with issues of addiction and isolation. However, Frusciante was the one who recognized the significance of those lyrics, created the chords, and played the first notes. So delicate, the entire band stood still. The music wasn't simply rock. It was an admission of guilt. It was like a volcano erupted when the CD came out. Albums certified platinum, world tours, and limitless airplay on MTV. Frusciante started to spiral out of control as the rest of the band reveled in the limelight. All he wanted was to play a decent song in solitude, and he despised being famous, being pursued, and having people yell his name at airports. In 1992, while on tour in Japan, John Frusciante suddenly left the band. No argument, no proclamation, no farewell. He just disappeared. John decided to go underground and start a journey no one saw coming when he was 22 years old, after assisting RHCP in making one of the best albums of the 90s. On the path to ruining oneself, achieving professional success, it was widely believed that John Frusciante would not return. He fell headfirst into addiction after leaving Red Hot Chili Peppers in 1992 and then seemed to vanish from sight, both on stage and in the media. However, the unfathomable occurred in 1998. A reborn artist, quaking on the brink of a new chapter, Frusciante re-emerged, not toothless, sunken-cheeked, or the empty shadow he had become. The Red Hot Chili Peppers needed a spark after their recent turbulent tenure with Dave Navarro, an immortal spirit that could be resurrected only by John. When he returned to the band, it was not as the bewildered youth he had been the first time. Rather, he was someone who had experienced death firsthand and returned with the knowledge that music could be the sole means of salvation for some. A miracle was the arrival of Californication in 1999. A new, melancholy sound, not the euphoric rush of Blood Sugar, was introduced by Frusciante. Larger, possessed. The guitar lines on Scar Tissue and the other side were so slow and constrained that they sounded like dried blood. They were beautiful in an exhausted way. Attempting to impress wasn't his goal. Using the notes, the silence, and the remnants of the storm, he was merely expressing the reality. All expectations were surpassed by the album. The actual prize, for Frusciante, was playing music sober for the first time in his life, but the accomplishment of over 15 million records sold globally, introducing a whole new generation to RHCP, and finally being widely acknowledged as the band's sound architect were all nice bonuses. The publication of By the Way in 2002 marked the pinnacle of artistic dominance within the band that Frusciante had achieved. By layering complex guitar parts and experimenting with open chords and dense harmonic textures, he managed practically all of the arrangements. His remarkable delicacy was on full display in the 4-track guitar composition Dosed, which made John sound like he was painting with strings. He also put out a slew of solo records around this time. In order to document Just Water for a week, Shadows Collide with People for almost every week of 2004, and an experimental series basically every month. The solo work of Frusciante stood apart from the sound of RHCP. It was lo-fi, occasionally strange, whispered, but always honest. The number of copies sold was irrelevant to him. Only its veracity mattered to him. Frusciante reached the pinnacle of his second chapter with 2006's Stadium Arcadium, a double album that showcased his knowledge of funk, pop, psychedelic, and minimalism, among other styles. The band's final enormous work before they entered a protracted silence was an epic record that he helped create, despite the fact that touring drained him. The record won 5 Grammys and sold millions. Not with drama or scandal, but with a calm post, Frusciante stepped away again in 2009. Playing in a big band is no longer something I'm interested in. Allow me some room to discover who I am. Thus, he vanished once more. Forget about destroying yourself this time. Upon which to rediscover. Not every fall is audible. Some collapse and some rise. Some things happen quietly, like when John Frusciante left the Red Hot Chili Peppers in 1992, at the height of the band's fame. What transpired was a mystery to everyone. The only thing they were aware of was that following a performance in Japan, Frusciante silently went back to Los Angeles, refused to finish the tour, and suddenly quit. Narcotics, booze, heroin, cocaine, and dried blood on the walls marked the beginning of a new chapter in that dilapidated house hidden in Echo Park. John led a secluded life, going weeks without leaving his house and not even cleaning his teeth or taking a shower. The walls of his bedroom were adorned with artwork crafted from a combination of paint, blood, and fragments of frenzied notes. He appeared lifeless with matted hair and decaying teeth. His face had shrunk like a skeleton. According to others who went, it looked like the artist was burning himself to death. He persisted in creating songs even while he was sick with addiction. Unusual low-quality recordings, which occasionally resemble laborious breathing, that were subsequently released under the name Neandra Lattice and typically merely a t-shirt. There was genuine, haunting sorrow on the album, and it was almost horrifyingly beautiful, yet there were no hits and no obvious structure. His home burned down in 1996. All but John's equipment, recordings, and artwork were reduced to ash. It was believed to be the final chapter. Reports were published by the media. Francesco had departed. Though no confirmation was given, everyone took it as a given. Someone who spent their life according to their instincts could never be an artist. Suddenly, an unthinkable event transpired. John Frusciante entered a rehabilitation center in 1997, absent any sort of press, cameras, or record deals. His luck had run out. The pain of withdrawal lasted for months. He had to relearn how to live a normal life after undergoing hepatitis C treatment, dental repair, skin grafts, and more. There was little anticipation for his return at that moment. Nothing exists outside of Red Hot Chili Peppers, record labels, and contracts, with whom Dave Navarro was conducting experiments at the time. To John, it was irrelevant. He longed to play music once more, not to perform, but to live. With shaking but composed hands, he took up the guitar again. Without the influence of heroin, he resumed composing music. Quietly re-establishing contact with Anthony Kiedis, he started reading spiritual books, meditating, and eating vegetarian. In the absence of anticipation and preparation. Next, RHCP contacted John after realizing they couldn't find someone to replace him. He didn't make a spectacular return in 1998. There were only 4 guys in a studio, playing guitars and letting their music do the talking. No press conferences, no media circus. Not as a celebrity, but as a survivor, Frusciante returned. Private life. Frusciante John never tied the knot. You won't find any tabloid romances, children, or paparazzi. The idea seems counterintuitive coming from someone who was formerly famous all over the world and performed at almost every big award event on the planet. It was a decision, nevertheless, for John. He maintained near-total secrecy about his personal life for a long time, completely absent from all public appearances, interviews, and social media. Many of his followers were concerned that he had relapsed, since he had been missing for an extended period of time. The reality, though, was that he felt more at ease with his life than before. Frusciante not only stopped using heroin after his rebirth in 1998, but he also stopped caring about what others thought of him. Isolated from the rest of the world, he opted to reside in a modest house nestled among trees in the Hollywood Hills. At midnight, he would frequently awaken, contemplate, record music, and jot down notes in his diaries. "A habit reminds me I'm still alive," he remarked, emphasizing that I'm not performing. John had a small number of relationships, usually with other artists, but he was very private about them and never said anything official about them. Nicole Turley, a musician and performance artist, was the only one explicitly mentioned. They cohabitated for a brief while in the 2010s, but they discreetly ended their relationship without a public declaration or court battle. Frusciante believed that love, like music, was something to be experienced completely in the here and now, rather than flaunted. "I don't require another person to affirm my value," he stated in an unusual interview. "To hear myself, all I need is a peaceful place." Because of his decision, he stood out in the rock industry, where flings, furious tweets, and scandals that make headlines are commonplace. Yet, John Frusciante's lifestyle was far from that of a celebrity. A loner who had once died of addiction and returned with the sole intention of holding serenity in his hands, he led a reclusive life. Some people think it's weird. A lot of people think it's a big waste of fame. But those who have heard him perform, Will to Death, or other ethereal tunes that seem to come from another world will comprehend. He has no other means of subsistence than this. Enduring impact and legacy. Aftershocks can be created by John Frusciante without the necessity of media storms. Like a trail of incense, his music is subtle but profound, never overpowering but nonetheless etched in the minds of listeners. There are 3 high points in Red Hot Chili Peppers' creative history, and Frusciante's influence is undeniable at each of them. Not because he was the band's primary songwriter or because he was the most charismatic performer, but because his presence brought life to the music whenever he was on stage. He is hailed by critics as RHCP's musical soul. Wet Sand, Californication, Scar Tissue, and Dosed are just a few of John's many guitar compositions that rely on his fragile, fragmented textures. In the face of despair, he found ways to provide harmony and melody. Plus, he managed to convey to everyone that suffering is beautiful and worthy of expression through music. In Frusciante's case, the guitar playing isn't up to par. His performance is that of someone attempting to maintain composure. Risers that blend flawlessly, looping like inquiries or fading like sighs. No showy solos, no complex technique. The most important thing is that music be authentic, not clever. Because of his ethos, he had an impact even beyond RHCP. His ideas have been influential to several generations of experimental, ambient, indie, and alternative musicians. All the way from Radiohead and the Mars Volta to Omar Rodriguez Lopez and the bedroom pop artists of today. His solo albums are typically hailed as scholarly works that delve into the self-discovery process through music, despite their non-mainstream nature. On his productive 2004 series, Transcendental Journeys, which